The night began with silence so heavy it pressed against Sophie's chest. She sat alone in her dimly lit living room, shadows stretching across the walls like reaching fingers. A sudden shrill scream sliced through the darkness, not from outside, but from the phone lying on the table. Sophie's hands trembled as the device lit up, displaying unknown caller. She whispered to herself, "Not again." The phone vibrated violently, as though alive. She pressed decline, but it rang again, this time louder. Sophie muttered, "Please stop." The caller answered her fear with a whisper that seeped through the speaker without her touching it. A voice rasped, "I know what you're thinking, Sophie." She froze, heart hammering. The voice continued, "You can't hide from me." The air turned icy, as if invisible hands closed around her throat. Sophie stumbled back from the couch, clutching her chest. The phone had stopped ringing, but a new sound filled the silence, a voicemail notification. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she pressed play. A distorted voice hissed, "I'm already inside." Her knees weakened, the words digging into her bones. She searched the room frantically, eyes darting across every corner. Sophie whispered, "This isn't real." Yet the silence after the voicemail was heavier than before, almost suffocating. She felt the air move, as if someone exhaled behind her. Spinning quickly, she found nothing but shadows pressing closer, mocking her disbelief. The following morning brought no peace. Sophie forced herself through routine, coffee brewing, but her hands shook so violently she spilled half across the counter. She avoided her phone, leaving it untouched on the table like a cursed object. Every sound felt amplified, the kettle's whistle, creak of the floor, even her own breath. "You're losing it," she whispered, gripping her head. Yet deep inside, she knew the voice had been real. Sleep-deprived, she wandered past her bedroom mirror, pausing as her reflection seemed to lag, a half-second delay. Sophie gasped and whispered, "That wasn't me." The unease followed her like a shadow she couldn't escape. That night Sophie tried to distract herself with a book, though the words blurred into nothing. Every few minutes she checked the corners of her room, convinced something moved just outside her vision. She muttered, "It's only shadows." Her body stiffened as the air grew heavier, colder. The faint buzz of her phone sliced the silence again, and her stomach twisted. She picked it up cautiously, screen blank, no call, no text. The phone buzzed once more, this time from inside her palm. Sophie dropped it, staring as it vibrated against the wooden floor. "No one should know this," the voice hissed faintly from the speaker without dialing. Sleep evaded Sophie entirely. At 3 a.m., she sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at her silent phone. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, mind unraveling with fear. Suddenly the device lit up without ringing, a message appearing across the darkened screen. "Do you remember the attic?" Sophie's stomach dropped. No one else knew about that room. It was locked, untouched for years. She whispered, "How do you know that?" Her voice cracked with panic. The phone screen flickered, letters rearranging into, "I know everything." Cold air swept through the room as if the house itself exhaled. The following evening, Sophie sat across from her best friend Daniel, at a quiet cafe, the hum of conversations around them failing to ease her dread. She whispered, "The calls won't stop." Daniel frowned, pushing his glasses higher, his tone calm but dismissive. Daniel said, "You've been stressed, Sophie. It's all in your head." His logic stabbed like cold steel, making her feel smaller. Sophie shook her head, eyes glassy. "He knows things no one should." Daniel's jaw tightened, yet he forced a reassuring smile. "Voices distort, memories twist. You're scaring yourself." Sophie lowered her gaze, the bitter taste of disbelief cutting deeper than fear itself. Later that night, Sophie sat alone in her room, her phone buzzing again. She hesitated before answering. The distorted voice hissed, "Remember the garden when you were 6? The broken swing? You never told anyone why you cried that day." Sophie's skin went cold as her childhood secret unfolded. Her breath stuttered. She whispered, "Who are you?" The voice chuckled softly, rattling her nerves. I know every memory you buried. Her body stiffened, stomach twisting with nausea. She felt cornered, her past no longer safe. Tears burned her eyes as she realized this was not imagination. This thing had been inside her life forever. The house no longer felt like her own. That same night, strange noises echoed in the halls. Faint scraping, like fingernails along wood. Sophie crept toward the sound, every floorboard groaning beneath her steps. She muttered, "Please let this be nothing." The noise stopped, replaced by heavy silence. Her pulse thumped loudly in her ears as she reached the kitchen door. Suddenly, the fridge hummed, then clicked off. The entire room sank into unnatural quiet. Sophie gasped as she noticed the window ajar, curtains swaying though no wind touched them. She whispered, "You're here," her voice trembling against the dark. By dawn, Sophie's nerves were frayed. She sat hunched at the dining table, clutching her head, unable to silence the torment. "I'm losing my mind," she whispered. The phone sat beside her like a predator waiting to strike. The screen flickered once, though no call came. She pushed it away, muttering, "Stop!" But her reflection in the nearby glass cabinet seemed to delay, lips moving a fraction too late. Sophie gasped, heart lurching. She pressed her back to the chair, breathing unevenly. No one else could see it, yet she knew what she saw. Something was in control, and it wasn't her. Exhausted, Sophie slumped against her bed that evening when a faint knock echoed at the door. Her heart jolted. She opened it cautiously, finding a woman in a dark coat, face half hidden. The stranger's voice was calm, cryptic. "You've heard him already, haven't you?" Sophie whispered. "Who are you?" The woman's eyes glimmered with unsettling knowledge. She said, "Not who. What? He's older than memory itself." Sophie's blood ran cold. The woman placed a folded note in her hand before stepping back into the shadows. Sophie stood frozen, the note burning in her palm with the weight of answers she feared. Sophie sat alone in her dim living room, clutching a blanket like armor. The phone buzzed again, its glow pulsing against the dark. She answered with a trembling hand. The distorted voice whispered, "Look left." Sophie's body froze before her eyes dared shift. In the corner, a shadow detached from the wall, tall and lean, rippling unnaturally like smoke. Sophie gasped, stumbling back as her heart pounded. She whispered, "No, you're not real." The shadow bent, head tilting as if mocking her fear. The voice hissed again, "I'm as real as your heartbeat." Every instinct told her to run, but her legs refused to move. The next morning Sophie met Daniel again, her desperation spilling out like a flood. She whispered, "I saw him." The shadow moved. Daniel rubbed his temples, weary. He said, "You are exhausted. Shadows play tricks when your mind's frayed." Sophie's voice cracked, "He told me to look." Daniel's brow furrowed, a brief flash of unease before his calm mask returned. He sighed, "Sophie, you need rest, not ghost stories." The disbelief cut deep, yet she clung to his presence for sanity. But deep down she knew his denial would leave her fighting this nightmare alone. That night, the call came again. Sophie's hands trembled as she answered. The voice whispered, "Step outside." Against every instinct, she obeyed, stepping barefoot onto the cold porch. The air was sharp, moonlight spilling silver across the yard. "Look at the street," the caller rasped. Sophie's breath hitched as she saw a figure standing under the lamppost, still as stone. A chill crawled down her spine when the voice continued, "Hell move when I say so." Her stomach twisted as the shadow under the light slowly lifted its head. She slammed the phone shut, but the figure remained. Later, Sophie searched frantically online for answers, her hands shaking as she typed. Strange forums whispered about the phantom caller, a presence tied to secrets and memories. A comment caught her eye, "He knows because he has always been there." Her breath stilled. A sudden knock rattled her door. She opened it to find the mysterious woman in the dark coat again. Calmly she said, "The calls are not of this world." Sophie stammered, "You know what this is?" The woman's cryptic eyes held no mercy. Knowledge is dangerous, but ignorance is death. Sophie felt the walls of her reality collapsing. Later that night, Sophie pressed her ear against the phone, listening to static that pulsed like a heartbeat. Suddenly the voice said, "Do you believe me now?" Her eyes widened. She whispered, "You're not alive." A chilling laugh echoed. "Not alive, but not gone. I was never born, Sophie. I simply am." Her body trembled, nausea rising. "Why me?" she begged. The answer slithered back. "Because you've always heard me. You just forgot." Sophie dropped the phone, clutching her ears as if she could block him out, but the words had already carved their place in her soul. The phone rang again, but this time Sophie didn't hesitate. She answered, voice quivering, "What do you want from me?" The caller's whisper grew sharper, slicing through the silence. "I want you to remember, Sophie. The attic. The screaming you ignored." Her stomach churned, the blood draining from her face. "That never happened," she stammered, yet the memory of childhood fear scratched at her mind. A cruel laugh echoed, "It did, and you left someone there." Sophie's hands shook violently as she dropped the phone. Her pulse thudded like a drumbeat of guilt. Something she had buried was clawing its way back. Later, Sophie dreamed of the attic she had avoided since childhood. In her vision, a frail girl's voice cried faintly from the shadows. She awoke, gasping, only to hear the same sound echoing faintly above. Heart pounding, she grabbed a flashlight and climbed the creaking stairs. Each step moaned under her weight, dust filling her lungs. At the attic door, her hand froze. A child's sob trickled through the wood. "Help me," the voice whimpered. Sophie staggered back, whispering, "This can't be real." But the air around the door pulsed with icy breath, alive with sorrow. She slammed the attic door shut and fled to the living room, trembling. Moments later, a knock shook her front door. It was the mysterious woman again, coat dripping from rain. Sophie's voice cracked. "I heard her." The woman's eyes darkened. "The victim lingers. He keeps her bound to torment you." Sophie whispered, "Who is she?" The woman said softly, "The one you abandoned. The caller feeds on unfinished stories." Sophie pressed her hand to her mouth, bile rising. "No, I was just a child." The woman's stare was cold. "The innocent still carry guilt. That is why he chose you." Daniel arrived unannounced, concerned but skeptical. Sophie pleaded, "She's real. I heard the child." Daniel's jaw clenched, shaking his head. "You're spiraling, Sophie. This is trauma, not ghosts." His voice carried steel, but his eyes betrayed unease. Suddenly the lights flickered, plunging the room into cold darkness. A faint child's sob filled the silence, echoing from upstairs. Sophie gripped Daniel's arm, whispering, "Tell me you heard that." His lips tightened, yet his face drained of color. He forced out, "It was nothing." But the tremor in his voice betrayed the truth. He had heard it too. That night, Sophie lay awake, listening to the silence. The phone glowed suddenly, screen bright with a message. "She's waiting upstairs." Her body froze, heart pounding in her throat. She whispered, "Leave me alone." The voice spoke without ringing, crawling from the speaker like poison. "You can't run, Sophie. Wherever you go, she follows. I will always follow." The air grew heavier, shadows bending toward her bed. Sophie curled tighter under the blanket, tears streaking her cheeks. She knew then the truth. This was not about escape. The horror was bound to her, and there was nowhere left to hide. The phone rang once more, its tone deeper, vibrating like a growl. Sophie answered with shaking hands. The voice whispered, "Do you remember your father's attic box?" Her heart dropped. "What box?" she stammered. The voice chuckled coldly. "The one filled with lies. He made me. He left me here." Sophie's breath caught as flashes of childhood surfaced, her father's stern warnings never to touch the locked chest upstairs. "You're lying," she whispered. The caller hissed, "Your family opened the door. You kept it open. Joe!" Tears slid down her cheeks, the unbearable thought taking root. Her bloodline had summoned this horror. The next morning, Sophie confronted Daniel at the cafe. Her voice cracked. "It's my family," he said. "My father created this." Daniel frowned, jaw tight. "Sophie, grief twists memory. Don't let guilt invent monsters." She slammed her hand on the table, startling him. "You don't get it. He knows things no one could." Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice. "You need help, not horror stories." Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. "Help won't silence him." Daniel exhaled sharply, fear flashing in his eyes before vanishing behind reason. "Then you're stronger than him," he muttered, though his tone carried no conviction. That night Sophie returned to the attic, flashlight trembling in her grip. Dust thickened the air as she pried open the old chest. Inside lay faded papers, photographs, and a cracked doll. A faint sob echoed from behind her. She turned to see a pale child figure in the corner, eyes hollow, face streaked with shadows. Sophie gasped, whispering, "Who are you?" The girl's voice quivered. "The one they left." Sophie fell to her knees, heart shattering. The caller's voice seeped from the phone in her pocket. "Now you see, the victim. Her pain is yours." The attic pulsed with dread. The mysterious woman returned, waiting outside Sophie's home in the rain. Sophie demanded, "Why didn't you two tell me?" The woman's eyes glimmered with pity and fear. "Because truth binds him tighter." Sophie trembled. "He said, my father made him." The woman nodded solemnly. "Your bloodline opened the door. He thrives on your silence." Sophie's voice cracked. "How do I end this?" The woman whispered, "Confront him, but you won't leave unbroken." Sophie's throat tightened, rage and despair clashing. She realized her fight was never about survival. It was about ending a curse older than her. As midnight struck, Sophie sat in her living room, phone clutched tight. The screen flickered to life, but no call came. Words scrawled across the display. "I'm inside your house." Her chest seized, eyes darting to the dark hallway. Slowly, a whisper slithered through the air, not from the phone, but from the shadows. "Sophie." She bolted upright, staring into the blackness as a tall figure materialized, head tilting unnaturally. Sophie whispered, "No." The figure leaned closer, voice crawling under her skin. "I've always been here." Her scream ripped through the silence as the lights shattered above. Sophie stood in the attic, flashlight flickering, her breath clouding in the frozen air. The voice seeped from every corner, mocking. "You've run long enough." She gritted her teeth, shouting, "I'm not afraid of you." Her words cracked, betraying her terror. Shadows twisted along the walls, forming the outline of the caller. The air pressed against her chest, heavy and suffocating. Sophie's legs shook, but she steadied herself. "You don't control me." The caller hissed, "I own you. Your family made sure of that." The light flickered violently, illuminating a face that wasn't a face, shifting, hollow, endless. Daniel barged into the attic, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Sophie, stop. This isn't real." Sophie spun toward him, desperation in her voice. "You hear him, don't you?" Daniel shook his head furiously, though his lips trembled. Suddenly, the caller's whisper oozed into the room. "He's mine now." Daniel clutched his ears, collapsing to his knees, screaming. Sophie rushed forward, grabbing his arm. "Fight it, Daniel." His eyes rolled back as blood trickled from his nose. With a final convulsion, his body went limp, silence falling like a blade. Sophie's scream ripped through the air as she realized she was alone. The phone lit up on its own, vibrating violently on the floorboards. Sophie stared as words crawled across the screen. "I am no man." The device lifted into the air, spinning. A low hum filled the attic, rattling the beams. Sophie whispered, "What are you?" The air shifted, shadows swirling into a towering figure with eyes like burning voids. The caller's voice thundered inside her head. "I am what your family birthed." An echo made flesh. Sophie stumbled back, gagging at the stench of rot. Her mind screamed to run, but her feet held fast. She finally saw him for what he was. The mysterious woman emerged from the shadows, voice steady. "You can't banish him, but you can break his grip." Sophie gasped. "Help me." The woman handed her a worn talisman, whispering, "It demands sacrifice." Sophie's stomach churned. "What kind?" The caller roared, shaking the walls. The woman's voice cracked. "Mine." Before Sophie could stop her, the woman stepped forward, pressing the talisman into the figure's chest. A blinding light burst, her scream piercing the air. The caller shrieked, recoiling. Sophie reached out, crying, "No!" But when the light faded, the woman was gone, consumed, leaving Sophie trembling in the dark. Sophie stood alone, the attic trembling. The caller reformed, weaker but still towering, its voice venomous. She gave herself. "But you are mine." Sophie lifted the flashlight, beam shaking. "No, I choose." Rage replaced her fear as she lunged forward, smashing the light into the shadow's chest. The attic erupted in sparks, shadows writhing like wounded beasts. The caller howled, retreating, its form collapsing into mist. Sophie fell to her knees, chest heaving, tears blurring her sight. The silence afterward was suffocating, but she knew this wasn't victory. She had faced him, and survived. Yet his presence lingered, waiting. The attic lay in silence, dust still swirling in the dim air. Sophie sat slumped against the wall, body trembling, chest heaving. For the first time in days, the phone was silent, screen dark. She whispered, "It's over." Her words felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. She dragged herself downstairs, each step heavier than the last. Shadows still clung to the corners, yet nothing stirred. Sophie collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. A faint thought echoed. She had survived. But deep inside, unease lingered, gnawing at her, reminding her that silence was not peace, it was waiting. Sophie stepped outside at dawn, pale light spilling across the wet streets. The rain had cleared, leaving the world deceptively calm. She wrapped her coat tighter, staring at the horizon. "I made it," she whispered. Yet her hands shook, as if denying her words. Passing neighbors smiled faintly, unaware of the horrors she carried. Their normalcy cut deep, reminding her she no longer belonged to their world. She was changed, marked. The quiet pressed against her ears like a scream suppressed. She knew the caller was gone, or at least weaker, but the memory of his voice still slithered within her bones. That evening, Sophie lit a candle and placed it on the windowsill, whispering to the unseen child. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." The flame flickered, bending unnaturally to the left, as if answering. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. The presence lingered, not hostile but broken. The caller's grip might have weakened, but the victim's sorrow remained, bound to her. Sophie whispered, "You deserved better." The silence that followed felt heavier than words, pressing into her chest. She realized then that survival was not freedom. She was now tethered to both the living and the dead, haunted by her bloodline's sin. Sophie lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to close her eyes. The house was silent, yet every creak felt alive, every shadow watchful. The phone rested on the nightstand, screen black. She whispered to herself, "It's over. It has to be." The words rang hollow. Her body ached from exhaustion, yet sleep refused her. Memories of Daniel, of the woman's sacrifice, and of the child's hollow eyes gnawed at her. She pulled the blanket to her chin, chest tight with dread. She wanted to believe, but a voice in her mind whispered that horror never truly ends. It waits. At 3 a.m., Sophie awoke to a faint vibration. Her chest seized as her eyes darted to the phone. Its screen glowed though no call rang. Slowly, letters scrawled across the glass. "I'll always know." Sophie's breath stuttered, heart hammering in her throat. The silence was unbearable, until a whisper drifted from the shadows, chilling her to the core. "Sophie?" Her scream caught in her throat, strangled by terror. The screen went black, leaving only her reflection staring back, eyes wide, haunted, broken. She realized then that endings were illusions. The caller was not gone. He was waiting, patient as the dark,